Welcome back to another episode of the Lore Library. I'm your host, Sarah, with my co-host in crime, Annalise.
Hello, everyone.
Last week, we were diving into the first chapter, looking back, kind of like, where did this all get started with the lore? Very excited to dive back into more of the lore. This morning, narrative team gave a live stage or a main stage on the discord.gg/ Disney Lorcana on the Disney Lorcana Discord. And that was really cool to see the people behind the actual stories being able to tell us kind of a little peek into what they do, how they pick the flavor text, how that whole process goes, and also how they choose this narrative. And what they said is kind of like Disney fan fiction, as it were, of like the story of Disney Lorcana, professionally written, is a fan fiction, right? Like a what if. These aren't canon Disney events. These are just like kind of a what if thing. And so kind of having that aspect to it kind of made it a lot of fun for me of like, oh, we're diving into this, Disney fan writing kind of stuff, and that fans of Disney had their input into the story. And that was kind of cool. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool to think about. Did you get a chance to watch the main stage today?
Well, yeah, parts of it. And I feel like for me, it reminded me, it's like what you just said, like the fans being like a part of it, or even just like how many people go into creating like stories and making like these decisions is fun. And I think back to even when we hear small pieces of how in making the movies and designing characters as well, like going through, all right, how's the audience going to react to this and everything? And now thinking about that in terms of a card game, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I was surprised at how many people are actually involved in creating the narrative. I was also surprised that only one person is the one creating the flavor text. So I was like, wow, that's both of those things were very surprising. But like you said, like so many people go into it, and I just love that everyone was always like, I don't know whose idea it was. I don't know where this originated. We all just kind of came up with it together. So seeing that people are Disney fans that are dedicated to the story and also dedicated to storytelling are the ones that are behind delivering this narrative to us that we're kind of discovering. When I first started playing, like I said in the last episode, I was so focused on learning the mechanics that I kind of just missed that there was this whole back understory. I had seen the teaser trailer. I had seen Shanzay discovering the Grand Illuminary. I knew there was something there, but the specifics of it was kind of lost on me. So now that we're getting into set 9, we're kind of having the opportunity to revisit these. So kind of revisit the sets and looking at the cards in a more holistic context, and looking at, now we have more of the clues all pieced together, we're kind of getting a clear story. And now with the newest lorecast, we're learning that things are kind of like in this 4 set chunk of a story, and then kind of rotate as like that's the entirety of like how we should be looking at the narrative, but then those chunks interplay with each other. So working on those first 4, we did talk about the first chapter. Now we'll get into maybe the last 3 and just kind of like finish off that little section, which we go from the first chapter, then we go Floodborn into the Inklands, and then Ursula's return. So for just like a brief overview, the Floodborn, where we left off in the first chapter, we're in the Grand Illuminary. We're kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Shanzay is there. Martin is there, who is a Illumineer. And now we see for the Floodborn, Martin with his Inkcaster, which is like a bass guitar kind of thing, is looking around the Illuminary. And I guess they're trying to like inspect and try to figure out like what's been going on while they were last there. And he finds kind of like this tome and with kind of some symbols there. And as he sees the symbols, it reminds him of musical notes. So he thinks, maybe I'll use my Inkcaster and play this song and see what this song sounds like. By doing so, initiates the great ink flood, right? And so ink starts flowing out everywhere. Martin looks really kind of like, oh no, what have I done? Right? And so that's how we get this category of floodborn character. Now that's something that we saw in the first chapter, right? We saw it as kind of like a category. And so now we've got all the floods, they're in the land. And what's cool is that these are the inks that are flooding. So the inks are all the different ink colors. So we've got amber ink is flowing, sapphire ink has flooded, all those things are flooded and they mix together. So what I find interesting about the Floodborn characters is, say we have Cinderella as a Storyborn character. As an amber character, she is got that support kind of aspect to her, or singer, that we traditionally see. But then as she gets hit with the ink from the Floodborn and kind of touches that ink, turns into her Floodborn self is a steel glimmer, right? So she goes from being amber, but because the flood of ink has a mix of all those ink colors, she's able to take on a characteristic of steel because that's represented in that Floodborn. So then she becomes this like really fantastical version of herself after touching the ink. And so the Storyborn Amber Glimmer then touches this flood of ink and then has like endless possibilities. So I think this is where different characteristics of the inks are going to be really important.
Yeah, and I feel like I immediately thought with that example of like Gaston as well, because I feel like the ruby makes so much sense with him in terms of like story of what we're used to, right? Like that story born of like, yeah, this is someone who's like is getting a crowd together, getting weapons together like a fighter. And then we get to see the inventor side of that in like the Floodborn and then the Sapphire card for Gaston.
Intellectual powerhouse, right?
And I
As
love
if,
on the Ravensburger site too, it says like some are wiser, at least they think they are, which is that clue too that they're still their character, right?
yes,
But like you said, this fantastical version, but they still are rooted in like their personality, but now maybe in a different situation, in a different storyline, like a little what if, like you mentioned. And right now I'm looking at the Gaston art, and I did not realize. I just love going back and like looking at things and seeing like that kind of like chalkboardish technology drawing he has behind him of like storm the castle, get Belle to fall in love with me. It's so funny because it's still their characters, right?
yeah.
But him
You see the
thinking,
narcissism coming through.
yes, the vibe is there, right? Like Cinderella is heroic, you know, she is the hero, but in a different, like in another life, it looks different. And so I really love that about the Floodborn, that some of them are a little bit more like extreme, but some of them are a little bit more subtle. Like even the Rapunzel one, she's an artist, and there's, you know, storyborn ones and dreamborn ones where she's also an artist as like, you know, that like tagline. But her Floodborn is also one. But it's almost like she got to always be an artist as opposed to having to escape a tower and then have that
Yeah.
happen. How
So,
the Lady Tremaine, some feel more fabulous.
yeah. So,
Like
yeah,
a
I
little
think
Lucifer there.
yeah, just kicking everything seems to be like amplified, right? Everything feels like, I feel like with, what is the category? Dreamborn. So, a dreamborn is stuff that you would dream up, right? But still in the realm of possibility. But Floodborn just feels like, yeah, just super fantastical. So I think it'd be really fun to be the one to like be developing Floodborn characters. Um,
And I
so
wonder
this,
what that's like, you know, like the extent to which you can change the character. Like, I wonder what those conversations are. And if there's any like pitches ever that they're like, maybe that's a little bit too like far away from this, like the root of the story, you know?
yeah. Well, and like it has to be this kind of balancing act between, I know that in the cycle of developing the card, they develop a card and then Disney has to approve the way that the character is portrayed and then it kind of gets approved. So if they're like, well, if we're making this card, if we make it too much, we know they're not going to approve that and we're going to have to like
Right.
prolong the development cycle. So you kind of have that delicate balance of like not over asking, but also delivering like this really great characters. It feels like it's a really, really dimensional job where you have a lot to have to juggle and think about. Yeah, so Martin made the flood. Floods are happening. Glimmers are changing. And so now we're gonna go. We're in the luminary. We look down and we're gonna go into the Inklands. Right. So we've left the luminary and we're traveling. We're getting out there into the Inklands, and that's when we start to see like hints of Ursula is coming. I think that's when we see kind of Venturo is like, hey, let's look around, let's explore, let's go into the Inklands. And what they're trying to do is, because of this flood that's happened in the Luminary, a lot of the lore books and the lore pips and things like that are out into the Inklands. Along with that is our item glimmers. And so along with that is Hexwell Crown is an item glimmer. And we've got King Triton's Trident is out there. And so in some of the art of the cards, we see kind of like the shadow of a hand, like grabbing the trident, or Tinkerbell trying to tell Venturo, like, hey, let's go over here. But he's like, no, I found the lucky dime. I can't blame him. As a Sapphire Steel lover, I was like, thank you for the lucky dime. Glad you got it. But Tinkerbell's like, hey, yo, this was like the main event was over here and you let it slip through your fingers. So, and then we're looking at from there, we've kind of looked around. We're looking around the Inklands. We're trying to figure out what to do about the flood. We're trying to gather up the items. And then we run into Ursula, right? So, do you know the backstory of Ursula's return?
So, one of the things I know that I loved in terms of details, seeing in like Into the Inklands, is having the like Deceiver of All card and seeing that the hair is different. Because that is something in terms of story I totally didn't notice. I was like, oh, that's just like a cute choice, how her hair is like the more colorful. But then having this story of there being like multiple Ursulas and everything, I found like it took me a minute to like wrap my head around when it first came out. But then I love
Yeah.
that they tied it into like having that game and then having the cards, but having those like alternate versions of them, which I think is
Yeah, so we've got Ursula. So glimmers, now we've talked about how like hold on, I'm looking up Floodborn Ursula. Yeah. So we've got, what do we have?
trying to find
Yeah,
it.
so we've got multiple versions. Glimmers are characters that are, in the Great Illuminary. We've used our Inkcaster, we've created them, and they're either Dreamborn or Storyborn, or now Floodborn if they touch this, ink flood that's happened. And those characters are not the ones that you're watching in the movie. These are ones that are the Illumineer has imagined and created. So multiple versions of Ursula can exist as Illumineers create them. Now, because they're villains, they decided, as villains do, to team up, organize crime. There's like, hey, there's all these items. They're out. They've fleshed out. One of those is this Hexwell crown. If we get together and we put our powers combined, we can use a Hexwell crown to our advantage. So one of those people is the Floodborn Ursula. So she gets affected by those flood waters, and along with glimmers that probably had not touched the water, so they're not floodborne. They were just probably in the luminary, in the Inklands. I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll find out. But so she's got, now I am the ruler is her ability. So I find that interesting, that I think there's going to be some double dealing done, right? So the main Ursula storyboard Ursula is like, hey, you guys, like, let's team up. And then this Floodborn one is like, team up. How about I'm the ruler now, right? So I think, again, like you were saying before, how the characters retain that undertow quality that just makes them that part of who they are, that even when they get the Floodborn, it kind of just amplifies that almost, where she's just like, I was power hungry before, like now watch me now that I'm Floodborn, like it's gonna be, yeah. And then the other one is You'll Listen to Me, which is no one else can sing songs, but it's just her original Ursula is like, sing a song so I can take your voice, and this one's like, no one's singing anything, period. So
Yeah.
very, very exciting.
And I feel like lore wise, it totally makes sense. Like you just said, it's like, all right, we're going to amplify it.
Yeah, so Floodborn for me have been some of the more fun cards in terms of like the art style or the abilities, just because it's just seeing these characters that we're used to seeing in such a traditional way get the ultimate glow up. And so I just think it's going to be really, really, really fun to start to see things like a card I just got to reveal was Poe Dispel, Magica Dispel's brother. He notoriously in the cartoon shifts, changes form, shape shifts into a raven. So if we could get him to have his, human form and then the shift form be a raven Floodborn or something like that, very excited for that. Putting that out there, hoping it happens. So I
And
do a lot
speaking
of
of,
thematic Ducktale building decks. So Ducktales was huge for Into the Inklands, and I was never more excited to get McDuck Mansion.
I mean, the Lucky Dime. I love the art on the Lucky Dime. Oh my god. And I like that it's in like on the Ravensburger site. The art for like Floodborn and like of the items and then seeing that like go into the lore of like into the Inklands and such. It's just so it's gives you that feeling. I feel like it gives the great Illuminary that feeling of this like artifacts like library, of like
Yeah,
all of these things from across like the Disney canon, which I love stuff like that where you have this idea of like a little collection and then them
yeah,
going after the things that they lost. And I feel like they really leaned into the art, especially in Lucky Dime. You see it of like it's something that was like precious and like held in this like sphere kind of holding. You
uh,
see that kind of great illuminary thing, and then but you see it being lost and like kind of just like drifting away. And that's something that I really like when they, in terms of like putting the story together, how the art kind of matches that, like the style and like the vibe of the cards.
yeah. Well, and what's great is they've got Venturo, which his on his arm, he's got the dual ink item thing that is Sapphire and Ruby. Well, Sapphire we know to be an item heavy archetype. So he is the one in control of the Aurelian gyrosphere, which is an item that helps them navigate the Inklands to try to like discover these items that were lost in the flood. So having him be the character that's driving item usage in the story in the narrative I think is great. Shanzi has the amethyst things, and so she's driving things that have to do with magic or the sorcery aspect of things. So I'm excited to see more from Martin because he is a support character and also with green kind of like a wild card. So yeah, I like that their characters are so deeply integrated into the ink colors and those ink identities, because when you're deck building, it makes choosing the archetypes that you're choosing to build your decks that more meaningful, right? So if you're trying to make a very thematic, for example, puppy deck, all those puppies support each other. So an amber support color, it just makes sense that that's the colorway that you're building with. And then you think, well, do I want these puppies to have items and be kind of industrious? Or do I want these puppies to have a ramp ability to like get to the point where I can have a bunch of them? Well, then naturally that's a sapphire thing, right? So, or did I want these puppies to kind of like control the board and have steel aspect to them and more of like that kind of support where maybe they're just questing and steel is there to help them support them or bodyguard them or give them that kind of challenge device. So it's fun to see that in this storytelling they are tying back to the mechanics of the game, that they aren't just in isolation of each other.
I totally agree. And then that's what makes it one of the things like going around judging that people have said about like this trading card game is that you really see people have fun with like being fans of the IP and really being able to like play around with things. Like people want to have decks that are like thematic with like movies or characters, and being able to like see that in the thought process when they were creating the cards is like awesome. You know what I mean? That some of the characters, they just work so well together, and like the Mother Gothel Rapunzel pairing, right? It's
Yeah,
just so like fun to tinker around with that and play with it, which is cool.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, having the lucky dime in a deck that has McDuck Mansion is just such a fun little thing. I always love it. I had a lantern out when I was playing Still Song and Rapunzel out at the same time, and then someone banished my Rapunzel, and I was like, how rude. She just launched her lantern. She was just out there, she was watching it, and you just are like, bye. And they were like, wow. I didn't even think about it like that. And I was like, well, now you should. You should think
Yeah.
about that when you banish someone. Okay, it's her
You've
birthday.
separated them. I love that. It's literally her birthday. How dare you?
Yeah. I was like, how dare you? I hope you feel good about yourself.
Oh my god.
Making
I
people
love
feel
that.
bad when they put the puppies in there. I'm just like, no, puppies. It's like, that's okay. I have Chernobog. I am happy to see them go.
Yes.
You'll get them back soon enough. They'll get
Which, oh my
adopted.
god, that
Don't worry.
was. I remember during set 3, the Chernobog decks. Oh my goodness, just like popping off. They were great. The morph coming in, also great.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to play around with things. Yeah, Beast
I hope
Tragic
he gets a
Hero.
reprint.
I know. Well, that's a whole nother conversation now we have, right? Of like, what's gonna get reprinted? What are
Yeah.
we gonna be able to keep using in
Mm-hmm.
like the main competitive? What's gonna be, left aside for a while? No, but speaking of, we're getting the Shift Madam Mim, which I think is fun.
Right.
So to play around with that a little bit more. But I think it's interesting because I feel like it was a very like speaking of creating cards, like that one to me mathematically seems very calculated to be a shift too. But because all the mims require some kind of bouncing, even
Uh-huh.
if they make, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's all the mims have that aspect of the bounce, like requirement, like part of playing them.
Snake. Right. Elephant? Mim elephant. I
I
don't.
think so. That's a good. I know that's not one that we really see
Right. That's why I
in
was like, wait,
play
Mim
as
elephant?
much. Let me look. No, I'm totally lying to you. As soon as it came out, I'm totally lying to you. Let me see. Banish her. Oh yeah. So
Return
Mim
a present
Elephant
character.
does.
Yep.
No, but all there's a bunch that don't. Totally ignore me. But they're cards that we don't really see in play, so I never like
The cheating
Madam Mim, Tiny
spellcaster,
Adversary.
right? She doesn't.
Yeah.
One of them does make you
No
like
one
make
cost
you
Mims.
discard a card. There's like a cost, you know?
Yeah, there's always something going on with her, which I do love, but I think it's like the 6 uninkable down to a shift 2 is amazing. But they've also made it right now with the cards that we have that it would be hard to like make that work because of that like payment you have to make with her,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
But I think that's fun to keep that trend going, and I like that in the card. Like I know if someone has a Madam Mim, there's bouncing going on in that deck. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how they
Yeah.
keep that because now we have the Rhino card, that's going to keep her alive in the new meta as we go forward. But I'm also interested in like which Madam Mims do they reprint, or
Yeah.
how heavy is the bounce? I guess going into the next arc of the card game.
I would love an epic Mim Fox. That'd be cute.
That would be.
These epic cards, I'm chomping at the bit for the epic cards. That I'm gonna be an absolute fiend trying to like find these epics, and I'll be buying cases for epics, and it's bad. They got me. They got me. They got me
Like,
good. They got me. I was like, ooh, they're like
oh my god.
enchanted, but just like a little bit more attainable. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
So if
But
we
then the
got
other
three
way
to five
too.
legendary per box, and we have this is like slightly more rare. We get like one or two per box. I don't know.
Is when the set comes out, I have to get a case. I just need
Yeah,
to know. I need my best chances.
I think I'm gonna need a palette of Fabled.
It's like we're not even there yet. We're not even in Jafar yet, and yet Fable, I can't get over it. It looks so good. It
Power
looks.
line. Power line.
Yes.
Let's go. Might be excited. I don't know.
But and then
Wanted
that
to
goes
stand
back
out.
to what you had mentioned, like with the storyline. There's like this ebb and flow of like an intense storyline, where there's like a lot of action happening, and then this nice period of like a little bit more peace or a little bit more just like adventure. And we see that with like the Floodborn being like, oh my goodness, this huge
Yeah.
problem, this giant.
Cataclysmic.
Yes. And then we have the Inklands. We're going to go adventure a little bit. And then Ursula's return. She's here. She's a villain. And I do like how they are doing that like ebb and flow of, all right, we have like Reign of Jafar being like intense storyline. And then Fabled seems like this now a little bit of like that, Yeah. A little, all right, let's get back to little peaceful times, little classic times. The Minnie and Mickey art already looks so good.
I just had a thought. You just sparked for me what I'm going to predict right now. Okay. So Ursula's return, and we're into that, right? So Inklands, we're traveling around. Ursula's return happens, and then we're gonna go to step 5, right? And that's afterwards, and that's kind of like the relief, right? What if Fabled is the relief that they are celebrating and they go to the parks? Go to the parks
Ooh, they are
because
on a
they are on a
ride.
carousel.
Yes.
And if that's King
No,
Arthur's
stop.
carousel at Disneyland, we'll
Eh,
actually die. That
That's
if
a
this
great prediction.
if I'm getting park cards like that soon, if we're celebrating the end of Jafar's reign by going to the parks, because at the end of the DLCs we go to the parks. We have like the championship at Disneyland and the world championship at Disney World. So like we just like to go to the parks when we win stuff. So please, okay,
And what's more classic, I love that.
Fable.
I need a
Toad.
carousel's iconic. I need now Matt, the teacups. I
Yeah,
love that
because we
ride.
have
I love
Alice in
getting on
Wonderland.
it
Yeah,
and
if we got, oh my gosh, please, yes, all the things. Pinocchio's there. Like, we have Pinocchio, and we're getting really good Pinocchio cards and range.
yes, that one did look good. I love that.
But for now, we're talking about pull it
We're
back in.
not
So
there
we've
yet. We're
gone,
not there yet.
yeah, we're not, but more to come, right? But so foreshadowing a little bit, but as we're in the Inklands, we see the Lucky Dime. They're like, oh, good, we got the Lucky Dime, but the trident gets taken away. And now we're like, oh no, now what? And it's Ursula, right? So we've got Floodborn Ursula, and she's like, I am the ruler now, and she's going to go against all the Illumineers. We've got Shanzi's there, Martin's there, Venturo's there. We've got everyone that went on the adventure in the Inklands. I don't know if Kita came or if she just was like, welcome to the Inklands. And then that was just like, she was just the hostess and that was her job. When we see that one cost Kita card and she had in Atlantean at the bottom says, welcome to the
Mm-hmm.
Inklands when you translate it. So I'd always be like, welcome to the Inklands. So I just feel like we've gone on that adventure, like you said. We kind of like went on a hiking expedition with Venturo. And now we've all got to team up and we've got to go against this Floodborn Ursula. And it kind of culminates into the Return of Ursula's. We get fun Floodborn cards that I feel like they're trying to help the villains accomplish goals. Like we've got Floodborn Diablo,
Mm.
and he's out here giving everybody cards. So, but when you look at the art on those, it just feels like maybe the villains might be taking this opportunity while everyone's distracted fighting Ursula to come up with their own plans. So when we see the trident being taken, King Trident. Jeez, why is that so hard? We see kind of like the outline of a character. I feel like it's Magica Dispel based
It
on
goes along with,
the
yeah.
shadowing. But and then we've got like Maleficence in the background of that Diablo card. And she's kind of there doing things. So I think they're all kind of waiting for their shot. Maybe everybody's distracted by this Ursula situation, right?
Mm.
So tell me more about Ursula's return. What do you got?
Well, one thing, I mean, I was just reminiscing right now about the enchanteds from that set, and they really lean to, like we said, the ink colors, and really like leaning into that because we have like this kind of like minimalist style for the cards, but then really emphasizing the color of the inks. Speaking of Ursula's return, and then being able to tie that into like the Illumineer's quest, which for me, being newer to trading card games like last year, I was like, oh, I don't really understand. Like, is this part of like Lorcana? Is this something totally different? And seeing it be kind of like a blend of like board game with a very like specific storyline versus like
Mm-hmm.
the card game deck building, I think is really like fun. And we see this like shift of cards like Anna, where I'm like the Anna card where she is looking, right? She is like
Yeah, when they're
searching.
entangled, right? So
Yeah, so
this
like the
this Floodborn
Lorcana.
Ursula is kind of like taking the glimmers and I don't know, like controlling
Yeah, it looks right, like taking over.
them.
Almost like yeah, like taking over their systems.
Possessing them in a way.
Yeah, possessing them. Yeah, I think that's a good description. Getting to see like the cards in the set for Ursula's Return, then be like influenced that way, and the ink details in the Illumineer's quest, I think is like was really interesting to me at the time, and seeing which characters they chose, right? Because we have like Anna and Hans and they kind of come together, but then we have like piglets in there too. So that mixture of cards that had, like you were saying, that flavor text in just like the card game Lorcana, seeing ties into this overall like storyline was like cool.
Yeah. I think it's cool too because we're starting to see now in Ursula's Return things that are answering questions that we had from the first chapter. So in the first chapter, you have the Ursula's Cauldron as a card, and then you see her in front of the cauldron in one of those cards. But it isn't until step 4 that we get the Enchanted, and we see the Enchanted art be that kind of haziness, is because they're glimmers that she's seeing in her cauldron, and that cauldron has something to do with the way that she's looking there, and that's where she develops this plan of like, I'm going to get together with all of the other Ursula glimmers and we're going to take over, right? So you start to see those pieces piece together that a couple of sets ago did not make thematic or narrative sense, that now have those pieces kind of shine through of like, oh, now I know why there's a cauldron, now I'm getting that. And I think it's fun, like as you're playing, kind of like, oh, and you're like making those discoveries as you're kind of just like waiting and staring at your cards a bit, and you're like, oh, I get it now. Or oh, what's that in the background? Or are those laser snakes? Just stuff like that where I'm just like, wow, the things you didn't notice before is really cool. So then all of this culminates into, we have, like you said, the Illumineer's quest. All the Illumineers get together, and after Ursula's Return, we have this kind of standalone game that has, you can play with everything that comes with it, and that's fine. But also you can build your own decks to kind of take the scenarios within it and see if you can build a better deck or make like a multiplayer situation that fits your group. And then you can kind of defeat Ursula and try to take her on, which when you're playing against each other in core constructed and stuff like that, you're just like, okay, your characters are questing, they're trying to get to 20 lore so they can get a story star, and that's the story there. But then to take it a step further and say like, okay, now that all of those glimmers have been doing those things in the background, now here's something that relates more into like you're directly involved in the story, and you've taken a part, you've either defeated Ursula or you haven't. It's hard to defeat Ursula. If you've never played Illumineer's quest, it is shockingly difficult to defeat Ursula. It is not really like a thing you can just do. If you know how to play Lorcana, you'll win kind of a thing. Like, no, you have to really know what you're doing. Don't let Ursula start with 7 cards, but that's not the way to go. If you're like
I
me
feel
and
like
made
people
that
were
mistake,
surprised.
yeah,
People were surprised how difficult
why
it
is
was.
she so strong? Like, how you gave her too many cards. So it is kind of different, but yeah. But I love it, and so yeah, looking at subsequent sets, now we're gonna get more of the Illuminator quests, and I'm excited to see Reign of Jafar coming soon. How that plays out. So we defeat Ursula. Spoiler alert: the Illuminators do it. They make it happen.
Did it.
And so now we're going to have set 5 next episode. We'll dive right in. Shimmering Skies. So in Shimmering Skies, as we were alluding to before, is the celebration, the sigh moment. Like,
We did
oh, we
it.
relax. We get to hang out. There may or may not be a food fight that results in a sticky Mickey. I don't know. But what I do know is that if Fabled is a celebration after the reign of Jafar, if we actually do defeat Jafar and get to go to the parks, I'll be a happy camper. More to come, but thank you so much for tuning in. I am Sarah.
I'm Annalise.
And this is
This
the Lore Library.
Lore Library.
We did not do it at the same